questions all the time about the overtime. Where's Rudd?
Cheese sandwich.
Come on, Betsy. Okay, Chief, thank you for coming. This is a committee meeting, a public safety committee for fire at this point, and then police staffing and overtime. So I guess if you can just give us a little overview as to where you are now staffing-wise,
Okay.
and then we can get into the overtime, and we'll have the counselors ask questions that they would like to have.
Okay. I have a couple handouts. I'm getting together a handout for you guys.
And Chief, if you just introduce the people at your table, would you?
Okay. So I'm Michael Mons. I'm the Chief of Fire. To my left is First Deputy Chief Steve Evans. To my right is our Fiscal Officer, Diane Nastry. The handout I gave you to go right to the staffing on the third page. It explains our staffing. When I saw you this time last year, we were down 54 budgeted positions. This year so far, our staff total is 359. 92% of our sworn members work on fire trucks. They're on the line. We only have 8% of our sworn members that work staff. Right now, I think our staffing is at the bare minimum where we need to be for the firefighters on the line, and as far as the functions we need to do as a staff. Like I said, we only have 8% of our members working staff positions. Looking forward to January 1st, we're going to have close to 24 retirements coming up. So as of right now, that's our staffing situation with our sworn and our airport crash rescue members.
So you anticipate 24 people retiring?
Yes, we have, right now we have 14 current vacancies, 4 projected by the end of this fiscal year, and then another 6 by January 1st to bring it to a total of 24.
And is there a current list, or has it been exhausted?
The list right now is pretty much exhausted. We've been recruiting. The deadline for signing up for our firefighter test was today. The test is going to be April 27th. It takes a few months for that to come back, and then when we start hiring, there's an 8-month process between when we send out the canvas letters till those people that actually make it through the interview are sitting over in training. So it's an 8-month process once we get started. So we're looking probably around this time to start that process next year once we get all the test results back, get everything squared away, and get a training class in place.
Chief, do you have any more of these?
Yes.
And can you just give us, before we go into other questions, a little idea of what you feel that will bring overtime-wise? What will that?
Well, so last year, our overtime in fiscal year 18, it's been the lowest that it's been in the several recent years. We were at 3.9 million. The years before that, it was at 4.8 and 4.4. So hiring a class directly impacts the overtime line, and you know, we've been kind of going through looking at different things, trying to be more efficient. But like I said, as I go through our department and look, we have more tasks and responsibilities we're doing more and more with less and less. So some of these things that we have to do, some of our mandated duties, they're going to have to be done on overtime because there's not enough staff and time during the day to do it. So I think overtime is a necessity to run a department as large as ours, you know, but it just has to be managed. But like I said, I think this year, the current fiscal year we're in right now, we're looking at probably being close to projected $4.1 million, and we have $520,000 of that's going to be reimbursed. So we're doing our best. I don't think there's not there's not much more we can do. Hiring a class will always help that bottom line, but like I said, we're doing more and more. We have out of the amount of fire alarms that go on in the county and the amount of emergency calls that the county goes on, our city, our fire department goes on about half of those. So we're very, very busy, and that's just where we're at with everything. And we're just trying to do our job with the resources that we have. I think I looked and did some research. If you go back several years, we've lost close to 88 sworn positions, and our alarms have spiked. In 2014, we had close to 28,000 alarms. So we're truly doing more and more work with less and less people, and somewhere along the line, you have to pay overtime for that.
Chief, do you have like a rough breakdown of the overtime that exists? Is it responding to incidents that come up, or is it structural things that someone needs to come in to do something on overtime and it's scheduled, and what that breakdown is?
If you look on the page 4, we have a chart, and it shows you where the line is. That's our overtime that we use to pay for when vacations or people are off, but that overtime directly affects our responses to alarms and emergency scenes. Excuse me. There are other things that occur as far as like the trail derailment or other things that might cause a spike in our overtime, but those are like one-time events or whatever. But our overtime is broken down by those categories: line, our fire prevention, training, special operations. So that's how it's all broken down.
So, but from line though, I mean, I guess the question is, so some of it, what you're describing is vacation plan things, right? Yeah. And some of it's probably there's a lot of incidents and we need to have. Yeah,
vacation, personal days, sick time. We got several people of our department are in the military services. They get deployed. Pretty much those are the main reasons why we have to cover for overtime. But vacations everyone has the opportunity to have vacation per our collective bargaining agreement, and that's where a lot of the overtime is, and with our line overtime.
Can I?
Yes.
Well, first of all, Chief, I'd just like to say, looking at this last graph here of the fiscal years, I guess you have a lot to be complimented on. Looks like this is, particularly fiscal year 2019, is considerably lower, but I was noticing that you have, massive increases in September, October, November, but then you're about half the annual. It seems you've packed things into September, October, and then half the annual usual operation budget during December and January and February, March period.
Yep, I got answers for those questions.
Yeah, I'm just
reason for September, October, and November. We had a couple fire watches, which we were reimbursed all that money. So,
what does that mean? Fire watch?
It's like I know I've spoken to many of you about our permitting process. So sometimes there might be an issue with a building, and in order for it to be occupied, we provided a fire watch just to be able to move the process along. And those were some of the months that we did fire watch. We also do training that we get grants for, but we pay for it up front and we get reimbursed. So those months were the months where those occurred the most. And at this time, our recruit class hadn't graduated. Our recruit class graduated October 26th. And if you look at that date, from that date on, there's a dramatic decrease in overtime. It's a
so there's more staff, so you were able to.
There's more staff, yes.
Great decrease.
On that point, I would just add that the 505 Walnut, right, the big apartment complex, that just made a $525,000 payment for the fire watch.
Yes.
Because that was a building that didn't have the right system, and then they paid us to have the fire department work overtime. So that's one of the big revenue changes in the mid-year transfer. But that's one example, which is like unbelievable that apartment complex paid $525,000 that helps fund the overtime, but that's great.
Yes. Any other questions? I mean, we've been doing our best to try to manage it, and I think if you look at the numbers, they kind of speak for themselves. So,
I would just compliment Diane Nasser, because I know a year ago we didn't have the seasonal chart with the spending, and it's great. I mean, it makes it so somebody asks a couple more questions, but the overtime breakdown by category combined with the seasonal over the last 4 years, it really helps, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Diane is great.
She is. So, Chief, what was your initial overtime budget?
$3.25 million.
Okay. And with the anticipation of 24 people leaving into the next year, did you add in or figure out what it will take to do these coverage for people? And
Yes, as far as a dollar amount, sometimes it fluctuates with other, like I said, the other leaves. But we're anticipating hiring a class to fill all these vacant spots, and we're going to have those in the budget. And if those spots are filled, the overtime will be as low as it was this fiscal year after October.
So how many new positions is it just gonna be the 24 to replace the 24?
Pretty much we're going to look to probably hire 28 and then kind of go from there.
And when would those 28 actually be out in the field working?
Once we get the test results back and we go through the process of sending out canvas letters, once we start that process, it's 8 months until they're actually working in the company on the line.
Okay.
So
What's the age limit for being hired?
18 to take the test.
Is there an upper bound?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, 35-year-old?
No, there's no upper age limit.
Okay.
Nope.
So theoretically, I could become a fireman at some point?
Today you can sign up for the test.
There's fitness
Time's
tests,
running
though,
out.
right?
There's fitness.
We'd love to have you.
What's, with your recruitment class, how many are female?
I believe right now we just got a bunch of the data back, but I think we have I believe close to 500 people that signed up to take the test. I haven't gotten all that information. We were going to look today. We actually dedicated 3 people to go out and recruit, and we're just waiting to get that information back to see what we got back from the people that did sign up. But was your question how many females do we have on our job right now, or?
Or in each class, how many you get?
Last class we hired 2. Right now, earlier this year we had 14 females on our department. One of those females retired. We have 13 right now. I think we try our best to recruit as a diverse and get as many females as we can to take the test. That was one of our main concerns, is trying to get more people to take the test, female, a diverse group of people to take the test.
So 13 out of how many?
Out of 359, which we're above the national average if you look at the numbers.
National average.
I'm just saying, if you look at all the professional fire departments, we're above the national average. I know there's always room for improvement, Madam President.
So, Chief, with the tests that we give out, how many other departments are we competing with to get folks? And then from that, pay-wise, how do we compare to those other municipalities that we may be competing with to get employees?
Right now, when you take the test, it's just for our department, so we don't compete with anybody.
Okay, so it's not any of the other municipalities that may have full-time fire departments.
Yes, and we have a competitive pay rate.
All right.
So just one more question. I'm still stuck on this number. So on average, you're only hiring 28 a year?
Well, it actually depends on how many vacancies we have. So depending on the vacancies, but right now we have 14 vacancies, and the cost it costs to put a class of 14 through. It's better to wait until we have more vacancies, and it's just more cost effective.
Okay. What's the cost for each class?
It fluctuates, but I think roughly between I gotta look that up, but it's somewhere around 200,000, and it could escalate depending on who's working and things like that, and what our staffing levels are.
Okay.
But I'll get that information for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I think I might have it here.
What was the number for when it makes sense to do the class at 30 or something?
I mean, it's definitely 20 and above, but when we have these vacancies, we try to hire as many people as we can, because a lot of times some people don't make it through, so we want to make sure at the graduation date we have enough people to put in the seats, or it's kind of worthless to do the training.
It's not like you need 50 or something to make it efficient. It's
No,
close.
I mean, we I think we all want to see the development of our city, and we're going to need more firefighters if we're going to keep developing the city like we all want to see. And at some point, we're going to have to look at staffing more people on duty and things like that. But right now in this budget, we have these vacancies right now to fill.
And so when we talk to you at the budget hearings in another next month, or, yeah, next month, we'll probably be asking you about that, what you look at optimal positions and such.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And Chief, one more question from me. What is your breakdown of residency on the fire department?
I don't have that specific number, but the last few classes, do you know what that is? Because you know what it is, Barry, when we just did the mandatory. You know, approximately. We got the number. I just have to get that right back to you when I get back to the office. But
Any other questions for the chief?
But our last several classes were required to live in the city for 5 years. So, but I'll gather all that information for you and get it to you today.
I appreciate that.
Anything to report back on the 5-year residency? I mean, have you been finding compliance or voluntary? I mean, any anecdotal things to report?
Yes, we just did we just had everybody fill out paperwork, and it had to be certified, and we sent it over to the personnel department. So I didn't get any reports of any discrepancies of what should have been the way it was supposed to be.
If you need any help, Council Driscoll and I can go and check, make sure that they got underwear and toothbrushes at their apartments.
Yep. Got to be a change of clothes there. I'm ready.
Any other questions for the chief or his staff? Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll jump right into police.
I mean, not in particular. That's
We can't see, and that's
That's, I mean, that's amazing. Right, right. I wonder, I still never heard what a cost analysis is like on that.
The reason they don't advertise is because it's benefits.
Right, right, yeah, yeah, totally.
so I can hire somebody brand new, but then I have to go and teach them what, you know what I mean? So, yeah. Yeah, but there's a number, and we can talk about it because I think we're going to need more, and I think we should be trying to hire more. Yep. Okay, thanks.
I do not. They had to share one of them. Sorry about that. Thank you.
I think we actually got it wrong this time.
Good morning.
Morning.
Chief, thank you for being here.
Sir.
I'd like you to give us a little overview on the department and its staffing.
Sure.
And we'll and tell us where we stand with the overtime, where we started, where we're stand, and as you know, next month we get into the budgeting process. So
Yes,
this is just a little preload.
So I have with me Sergeant Lutz, who's our bean counter for the police department, does an outstanding job. And he will certainly assist me here. So as when we look at our staffing, I'll just go down the list here to show what's actually authorized versus what we actually have today. You can see in the middle column there, we're looking to the far right where it says March the 22nd of 2019. Obviously, myself and the four deputy chiefs, those positions all filled. There are 7 captains that we currently have today. There are 19 lieutenants, 55 sergeants, and 320 police officers for a total of 406. We also have an anticipated 6 additional officers that are scheduled to retire by April the 30th, which will take that number to 400. It's also important to note that you all have been invited to our graduation ceremony that is on Friday. The numbers that you see here include those promotions. So in addition to that, from a staffing standpoint, we have 32 recruits who are scheduled to go solo, which means that they will be able to independently take calls for service in cars on April the 7th. We're currently canvassing for a class of 39 that has been authorized that our background investigators are working on right now. So we'll have the 39 that will be starting on May the 21st. And then there are also 5 laterals that we're looking at right now. From July the 1st of 2018 through February 28th of 2019, we've had 29 retirements.
Are the laterals in addition to?
I'm sorry?
In addition to the 39? The laterals?
The laterals, the 5 would be in addition to the 39. Yes. The laterals are certified police officers from another agency. Yes.
So sorry, Chief.
Yes, sir.
From another agency, so they'll be coming from, what's that, different? Oh, okay, so different departments.
Yes, sir.
Regional, or do we pull a lot from out of the region?
I don't know. I know that there's 5 of them, 4 of which are male, and then there's 1 female in the group. I don't know the individual departments that they're
Okay.
from. They're usually somewhere relatively
Somewhere
close.
usually
Yes, sir.
relatively close.
Family
Okay,
is Chittenango,
right.
DeWitt.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then if we go to the overtime, if you look at the general services and then field services, you can see that the total there is $7.4 million. Expense this year, we've spent 6.45 of that. Remaining balance we have of $974,000. There's an annual reimbursement of about $2 million that we receive as a result of that. On pages 4 and 5, you can see a list of all of the things from an overtime standpoint where we do not receive reimbursement for these items. And then if you look at page 6, you can see all of the items that make up the approximate $2 million for things that we actually receive reimbursement for. Some of the examples of that are things like the dome, part of the school system, grants that we have. Those are some of the bigger ticket items that we actually receive reimbursed for those. And the airport, if I didn't say that.
So can I ask a quick question? Because I'm looking down the list.
Yes, ma'am. What page are we on, ma'am?
I'm on 4.
Okay.
And my mother is now, but okay. Page 4, where I'm looking at 169, Vice President Security Detail. Did we get reimbursed?
It is not my understanding that we get reimbursed for that. That is kind of a courtesy that we must, well, I would say must provide to assist Secret Service. That is not uncommon for police agencies to do that because the other side of that coin would be if we were to have a dignitary of that level to where something happens in our city, we certainly wouldn't want that on the face of Syracuse. I can tell you that going across the country with Secret Service details, local PDs pick up a significant part of the load for securities when these individuals visit your respective cities. That's very common.
Yeah, the federal building right there.
Yes, I understand. We just never say no to Secret Service.
Chief, sorry, the other one I had.
Yes, sir.
The Clinton Street Bridge collapse.
What page are you on, sir?
It's page 5.
Page 5.
37.
I'm just not sure. I mean, not to put you on the spot on individual ones, but how that wouldn't be a reimbursable from the company that owned the bridge that collapsed.
Would you know that, Brian?
Yeah, we put together information we forwarded to City Hall shortly after the event. Corp Counsel is going to look into going after the bridge owner. It's listed as non-reimbursed here because, to be honest with you, I don't know the outcome of that, whether we actually got the money. Figured it was safer to put it in the non-reimbursed. If we get the money, that's a bonus. But I know it was pursued.
Thank you.
So if you all will go with me quickly to page 4, I want to give you just a little bit of an idea of to let you know that I certainly understand that the overtime budget for the police department has been the focus of a significant amount of scrutiny. I can tell you that my responsibility and goal is to make sure that when I'm responding to the mayor, to the common council, and to the public, that I can give an intelligent answer as to why we are using the overtime. And just in my early tenure of my first 4 months or so, I've done a couple of exercises to try to get my arms wrapped around this octopus, for lack of a better word, and we've pulled the numbers of our top 30 individuals just to look at that, and I want to ask what and why, and to look at those things, both individually and then also from the standpoint of some of the units. And then I've also, as a result of this reorganization that we're doing, we've taken steps to try to mitigate some of the overtime that we have, because we believe that there was an opportunity for improvement. And if you look on page 4, and if you start up at the top there and you see patrol minimum staffing, going forward for our classes that will be coming out of the FTO period, our goal is to try to have a net gain of 80% of those individuals to remain in the patrol, which is uniform, division, taking calls of service, to try to help the front line of the police department. The next thing that you see there, a big ticket item, when you look at community policing will be go from a centralized standpoint to where they currently work for Chief Schaff and his bureau, to where they will be in the uniform patrol division, to where they will 4 or 5 of those for each captain that will be responsible for the 3 divisional areas. We will also modify their hours. Much of the time that they're receiving this overtime for is a result of them currently working a 7 to 3, 8 to 4 kind of shift, when many of the days they're required to be at these community meetings. It didn't make sense to me to have your shift be that early when we know that part of your primary duties include evening activities. So that will be changed, and we think that will mitigate some of that. I can tell you in no way, shape, or form is this any shade on any of the individuals that were working those hours. This is just me trying to be a good steward of the dollars that we have and try to reduce some of the overtime, or at least be able to intelligently respond to the questions that you all will have for that. Training backfill. So when we have officers that are in training, if we're sending them out to do their in-service training, or whether that be a SWAT training, whatever that may be, we often have to pay to backfill for those positions for the individuals that are away from their primary responsibilities. Hopefully, by putting more people and more of an emphasis on patrol, we will be able to reduce some of that. In addition to that, if you go down and you look at recruitment, there was $72,000. We think that we will be able to mitigate some of that. If you look at 124 and 183 there with records in there, currently there are sworn police officers working in those positions. We believe there's an opportunity to transition that position amongst others that I'll give you a list of, to where we take sworn badge and gun police officers, push them to the front line of the police department, where they're doing the primary job that they signed up to do, to take them away from these administrative responsibilities that we currently do. Other opportunities for that include
Where was the first area you said there, Chief? Was that media relations you were talking about?
No, that was the records. The records.
Okay.
Some of our sworn folks in there. So property room, crime scene investigators. The only issue with the crime scene investigators, all of these have to pass the legal threshold that we're able to legally still perform the job for that function. There was a question about both crime scene and property room. We've answered that, and we think that we've done the same for crime scene. But then there's also the contractual resistance that we expect to have for many of these conversions that we will attempt. The other is HR, records that I mentioned earlier, IT, and then special events. There will still be a uniform component in special events, because we think that a sworn police officer should certainly be as a part of that review when you're talking about planning for large-scale events. And then also from the crime scene standpoint, I sent the sergeant to another city to take a look at an agency that has civilians doing the job, because our agency was totally unfamiliar with civilians doing the job. I came from 2 agencies to where civilians did the work, so I wanted him to see it with his eyes. He went to see that. It's an accredited police department. He sees that you're capable of doing it. But we would want to incrementally do that based upon retirements, because of the tie to these investigations that are so key for us when we're going to court, prosecuting these cases, particularly felony crimes. We want to make sure that we don't just do a kind of a turning over the table overhaul of that entire unit. We would want to incrementally do that as the individuals retire from that unit. We're projecting that would give us approximately 17 additional police officers if we were able to do these conversions, which would happen over time, to put additional folks on the front line of the police department. That's the plan. Again, that has to pass the legal with our core counsel, and then also dealing with the contractual issues with the union.
And I don't know if I missed the question. It may not have been asked.
Sir, what page?
But this is more of a generalization. I'm
Okay.
looking at the vacancies, and really it's in combination. While we know oftentimes you have, when bringing on new hires, you have retirements that happen, so it's hard to capture a realistic number. But just a question for consideration: with the 63 some odd vacancies, what could filling those mean for the approximate 1.7 minimum staffing requirements, cost for overtime? It's 1 point, and or the 2.9 million police functions.
I think that you could certainly probably say that if we were fully staffed, and in this example, fully staffed would be what we're funded for, which is 463. I think that you would see a reduction in that. I will tell you, because of normal attrition, we will probably never be at the full number because of that turnaround. But I certainly think that we can improve upon that. Probably if we were able to have a couple of years to where we hired 2 classes in a year rather than the one that we've been doing. I know that the mayor's office is certainly looking to see how we will be able to do something like that or increase the size of the class. I will tell you that at the time that we started the hiring process for the current group that we had 39 vacancies at that time, and the mayor gave us the authority to fill for the full contingency. So that number has grown to 49 since that time. But at that time, we had the authority to fill for the full contingency. So the city has certainly been committed to trying to fill our vacancies.
Appreciate it.
I guess building on Councilor Bay's question, the patrol minimum staffing number there, are there structural issues where a certain day a week there's not someone that's scheduled and you need to do it, or what goes into that minimum staffing
Well,
number?
sir, that question again is I'm trying to learn, the department in a very intimate way. My day is tasked with trying to digest this kind of stuff. So I asked for, give me some examples of the kinds of things to where we have officers that are off that result in us having to do a minimum staffing refill, a backfill for that individual. And there were about 14 different categories that an officer could be off from work, and then we in turn have to backfill for that position. Some of that is contractual, some of that is just the nature of just doing business, but that part creates a challenge for us.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. So as of right now, minus the 6, we'll be at 400 officers, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you have a new class coming up May 21st, and that's 39 people?
39, yes,
39.
ma'am.
So is it unrealistic to think that we can get 24, like an additional class towards the end of the year to bring us at the 463, or you guys don't think that's realistic?
I don't, two questions I would have about that. First of all, would we have the funding to do it? And then the second part, logistically, because there would be an overlap between the 39 that are currently will be starting and with their completion, and logistically, could our training academy accommodate 2 classes with that slight overlap that would probably be there? That would be the 2 questions that would need to be answered.
Okay.
I would say to you, Chief, the funding is there, and this board supported the funding for that. So the funding there would be there. It would be whether or not the mayor would want to authorize that funding.
Okay.
So, yep.
Sorry, can everyone hear Chief? I just want to make sure unfortunately, we don't have enough mics, so we got to make sure we're cognizant of the.
I could hear him before watching in the other room, so.
Okay, good. Sorry, just as a musician, I like to make sure mic placement is constantly at the forefront.
What is Act for America? What is that?
What page are you on?
5. And it's almost midway.
Item 42.
42. It's a small amount, but who is that? What is that?
Act for America number 42 is like $1,000.92. You know what that is?
Act for America.
But it was reimbursed.
42.
Or was it not reimbursed?
Whoever it was, they gave us our money back.
Okay, good.
Do not know, ma'am.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask this question, and it's like, because SU are very good partners in most things. So 180, SU Homecoming Parade, and it costs us $800. Is that reimbursable?
What page are you on, ma'am?
5.
5?
Item 180. Yeah, that is reimbursable. Is it?
I'm gonna come up with, I wanna tell you something too that we will, we're gonna answer your question. We've just met with a vendor, to put our overtime to go from paper to electronic. So the question asking will be a lot easier for us to do when we can have everything in that format. Us tracking that will be a lot easier. Being more accountable for the administrative side of that, because I can tell you that one of the things that I discovered is that the paperwork just doesn't work in the 21st century, and we're in the process of fixing that. And then we're also going to have software that will help us with many of these things that are done in an off-duty capacity, that we will be able to electronically also control that. So those two pieces of software will help us significantly with some of this, and I anticipate that there will be some administrative losses that will be reduced as a result of just having a better tracking mechanism. To your question about the SU $800 homecoming parade, it says the far column there like it's reimbursed, I'm assuming.
Have to look into it, I'm not sure.
What it says, well, I don't know, man, if it was reimbursed. I just said it was police overtime function.
We have a parade throughout the community, and we escort them around lockups of the road.
Chief, on page 4, and
Yes, sir.
my apologies if I missed this, but the top one, non-PC overtime, can you break down what's included in that?
You said on page 4.
For the very
First
top,
line.
first line.
Non-PC overtime.
Can we take it?
Yes, sir.
What that basically is, Counselor, so, and this is one of the huge inadequacies of the current payroll system. So if an officer is held over on a call for any reason, every call gets what's called the DR number attached to it. Officer stays over 2 hours on a burglary, on his overtime, he puts that DR number. The system can't sort or track by DR number, so while we have a paper record of the officer was on a call for service, it lumps all of that into this one number. So there's no way for us to say how often is a cop on a burglary, how often is an officer on a DWI, whatever the case might be. The only exception, because of the cost associated, we separate out homicides. We actually give them a DR number so we can specifically track them, because they can get quite expensive. So that is all those calls for service lumped into one spot.
What does non-PC stand for?
PC is program cost. Those are the numbers down the left side. That's the number we use to track it by.
Oh, okay.
That's just everything that doesn't have a number
So
assigned
that's
to
not
it.
designated for a certain program, as you said, because it just goes into a lump file.
Yep. So it's all those calls for service that run past the end of an officer's shift. If a detective has to conduct a follow-up investigation, again, it's all a paper record. The new system the chief referred to will actually be able to sort that electronically and have a lot more detail for you going forward.
So
And
yeah,
very
it's
quick
about-
queries as well.
what's that?
And to query more information for you.
Great.
Current software just doesn't do it.
With this new software, is this software that we've already purchased and it's going in this fiscal year, or is this something that you're asking for to purchase in the upcoming fiscal year, in this next budget?
We have not purchased it. It is an item that is in the request for the 19-20 budget.
Okay.
We're in the process of reviewing it now. State police actually use it. I'm scheduled to meet with them next week to actually really get into it, find out if they like it, hate it, what's good, what's bad.
And how quickly do we think we would get this software up and running so that we'd be, better able to track it?
The company has told me that if we're happy with it, and if something the police department wants to do and the city wants to back, they could probably have it in place by July 1st. That would obviously require money to come out of the current budget. We've asked for it next year, so there might be some shifting of funds there to get it in place, but.
We certainly have a sense of urgency, whether it be this software or we find something else. In looking at the paper documents, when trying to wrap my arms and eyes around what we have and how it's going, about 50% of the time when we would pull the sheets, although the date and time that work was on there, the reason for the work was missing sometimes. So those kinds of things that will all be cleaned up when we're able to do it electronically.
So this is a whole nother subject, but then we're really here for. But so would it be scanned? Would it be paper and then somebody data enters it? What's the process?
The process actually pushes the entry down to the individual officer. As far as timesheet and/or overtime or time off requests. So officer will log on to a terminal. Let's say he worked overtime that day. He would do an electronic, I mean, it would look like our paper slip, but it's an electronic input. He then submits it. It then goes up through an approval chain through a supervisor, so on and so forth, and then eventually makes it into the payroll. Yeah, so there wouldn't be additional data entry people or anything of that nature. It would just be pushing that task onto the individual who is already filling out a paper slip. So.
I have one question, not related to the software, but still on page 4.
Yes, ma'am.
So we all live in Syracuse, so we know that we have a lot of festivals in the summertime. So this may be obvious to some other people, but with each individual festival, do they pay for security? Like, how does that work? Because there's a lot of money that's going into these different festivals, and they're making money off the festival, but we're spending more.
Well, I will give you the 30,000 foot view of that. I will tell you that more often than not, when we have these specialty kind of details, they're paying for the officer, for the overtime for the officer to work that. The issue is about 34% or so. In some instances, it's not for what the full cost is to the city. So we're still taking a deficit. The issue, the challenge that I have of trying to walk that tightrope is that I don't want to cost the city out of being a destination city, because if cities can get cheaper costs and go to Baldwinsville or wherever that may be, then they're going to go there. So, but I have to find something that we can digest without running off some of these vendors to have things in our city, because when you talk about hotels, restaurants, and things of that nature, that's a challenge that every city deals with, but we certainly want to try to reduce some of that. In my prior capacities in other cities, when we tackled this issue, let's say that we're using that 34% as a target, that we wouldn't just immediately go to that vendor or the individuals who are not giving us the full board today. We would say over the next 5 years, we do a 6% increase to increase what they're paying us, so that we get to that full amount that they can grow into that payment for these annual types of events that they have, so that we just don't kind of come up this year saying, hey, it's going to be an additional $10,000. If you're a mom and pop sickle cell anemia walk and run, that's a big deal. So we have to try to figure out how to balance that.
Yeah, and some of them, I know it's, as we talked from before, some of these are rallies and such.
Yes.
You know, like when people gather for the Women's March, for example, I see is one of the ones on here. So there's a gray area about what services we provide that we want, the laws. You know what I'm saying? Some of those we want to have those events and we have to provide the services. So that kind of has to apply across the board to other ones that come in. I think if you're talking about a festival that makes a lot of money, there's a different, to your point, a different conversation that can be had. But we also have the services that we have to provide, and then why do some people get exemptions, some people don't, kind of thing.
Those rallies is a great example.
Yeah.
Because we have a duty to protect protesters in some example, which is not very popular, but that's our responsibility and duty to do that.
Yeah, and the rallies aren't generating money.
Right.
Yeah, but these festivals.
I agree with you. For the folks who are making money, there certainly should be a cost.
Some compensation.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a separate organization that uses city facilities, we pay for the police. We certainly, the city don't pay for us.
Yes, sir.
So I think it's a very valid point to say, for some of the festivals, and I don't doubt at all. We certainly don't want to run people away by hitting them, with an enormous bill on the front end. But it's definitely something, Mary, that we can give consideration to and look at reducing our costs.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And to be consistent to where we can say why we did this over here versus over there. That's another issue.
Yeah, we would love free police services, so we can't get it. We got to pay for it. So.
I have two. I want to ask you, I'm looking at the funeral details.
What page are you on, ma'am?
I'm sorry, 4 for
Okay.
both my questions. Do we do a lot of funeral details here?
We do a lot of funeral details.
No, not really.
Page 4, that's okay. Yeah, $7,300. No, ma'am, I wouldn't, with $7,300, I wouldn't say that's a lot of funerals.
And that's for what, a dignitary? Because I know it's not for just regular people.
I'm assuming that someone just wanting to, for a police escort, or in some cases, maybe where there's been some kind of controversy or an issue or something with the individual that's deceased, may want a police presence for that reason.
Okay, and this one right here is near and dear to my heart, cold cases.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm looking at the amount. So
On page 4, ma'am?
Mm-hmm. Is there full-time staff assigned to the cold cases?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
1, 2?
What is the staffing for?
Because we got some cold cases from
Several.
years back that
I'll follow up with you. I don't know the
Yeah, I'm not sure
staffing
the
number.
actual number as of today.
And some data on recent clearances.
Right.
I can tell you that obviously cold cases is a separate conversation, but with the national average for clearing homicides is about 64-65%. Our detectives average somewhere in the mid to high 80s, which is, and consistently they've been able to do that. So they do an outstanding job. We've got some really sharp detectives that are very impressive, and I've seen a lot of detectives, and these guys are sharp. So we do a really good job of that, but there's still a lot of cases that do go unsolved
And I'm not
that make it to that cold case.
Right, and I'm not taking that from you because you do a good job. But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Rudd.
Do you know the rate for the whole department? You said you had detectives who have like 80% rates, but what's the rate for the entire department?
On what crime? So, because I was referencing homicides.
I get it, but you were using numbers, so like I guess comparably.
for homicide.
Well,
Homicides.
for homicide, the national average is about 64, so ours is 85-ish.
Oh, so the whole department is 85. Okay.
For the homicide unit. There's a unit that does specifically homicides. Yes, sir.
Okay,
And then property crime clearance is about 18, 19% or something.
and I'm gonna go back to my
Yes,
question
ma'am.
again. We have, I know for a fact, and I'm nothing because I know they do a good job, but we have still open cold cases
Yes, ma'am.
from 06 and 05 and 04.
Yes, ma'am.
So are we ever gonna close those? Do we
Well,
know?
I can tell you with those cold cases, in many regards, because again, I will tout their horn again. They do a great job of solving the cases that we're supposed to solve. Usually, when we have a case that's not solved, it deals with a few things, lack of witnesses or cooperation. And in particular, and I can tell you what, for the most frustrating are aggravated assaults when you talk about shooting victims. Very low clearance rate on that because in many regards, the person that was shot wants nothing to do with the police. We do a better job on homicides than we do where the victim is living. So that's the difficult part for us, is getting cooperation from the public to assist with that. But from an investigative standpoint, collecting evidence, these guys do an excellent job.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I got some families that's still waiting for answers, so.
And if it's a callback kind of thing or not being communicated with, that's a total other issue that if you give me the information, I can.
No, I don't think it's a callback. I think they're cold cases that these folks still don't know what happened to their children.
Yes. And unfortunately, there are a lot of cases like that.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a few, Chief.
Yes, sir.
I was just curious, looking on page 6 of reimbursements. For example, we have Parkside Commons paying $187,000. I was just curious, how do we arrive at that number? Is that a prearranged? Do we budget it before, or is it just a response that we reimburse for? Do we time and a half pay? Do we know like what the scheduling is? You know, like say what we're getting done with 187,000. What if the police needed 250,000 to do the job efficiently? Would that be how would that billing matter be a range? Do they tell you what the ceiling is beforehand, or do you just send them a bill? Or I'm curious how we arrive at that number.
Apartment complex. More often than not, that's going to be an agreed amount of hours that they have said that we want an officer here for 20 hours a week. Usually the person that's responsible for that detail will either schedule individuals or work it themselves, but it's usually set around a certain number of hours that they've asked for a police presence.
Okay.
Some of that may spike during the summer months or during the holidays or something,
Right.
or if they're having a crime issue, but it's usually the dollar amount is set on a certain number of hours.
And I don't know, I know you've only recently joined us, Chief, but I don't know if anyone can answer this. The housing vision security, item 50 for 45,000. Do we know what area that covers? Page 6. It's another one that's reimbursed. So I mean, it's
50.
Primarily covers the Pioneer Homes area.
Housing Vision?
Yeah, that's just the name of the company the payment actually goes to, the Housing Authority. It's somehow connected there.
No, Housing
Pioneer is
Visions,
Syracuse
yeah.
Housing.
Housing Visions is its own private.
Yeah, I'd imagine that would have to be. I'm aware of them on the east side. I know they do work around
They
the
have,
city, but I'm
property over on
curious.
Prospect Hill as well, and there's.
They have
the whole
property everywhere. That's why I was
property-
curious.
Pioneer Homes.
What's that?
So they don't have property down by Pioneer Homes,
No.
though.
That's the Housing Authority. isn't it?
Well, yeah, I guess.
I'll get the location.
Yeah, if you guys could get back to us on that, just on, I'd be curious on the breakdowns of what the 187,000 in Parkside Commons looks like, and what the hours are on that, and I'd also be curious to know what Housing Vision's security accounts for, and where those officers are sent, and what the hours are for that, if that's a possibility. Just curious, because Housing Visions does a lot of work throughout the city, so I'd be curious where that security is provided and what we do with that, if that's all right.
Housing Vision and Parkside Commons, yes, sir.
Yes, so that's item 27 and item 50
Got it.
on page 6. I'd just like breakdowns on what we're doing in those two places and what that looks like, if that's possible.
And one last thing, I know we can be here all day with each item, but what is GIVE? I see 200.
GIVE is a violence reduction strategy that we use to try to reduce violent crime.
Okay.
That's what Larry Williams was running us.
Right.
And it's grant funded.
Okay.
Reimbursed.
So it's all reimbursed.
So Chief, can I ask you how many
Yes, sir.
promotions Friday? What do they look like?
Yes, sir. The promotions on Friday, thank you. That was a good softball you just pitched me. The promotions on Friday will be 9 sergeants, 5 lieutenants. We made some incremental small progress in diversity. The 2 top lieutenants on that list were females. And then for the rank of sergeant, there's 1 Asian male and then 1 African American male.
And these, all these are going back to patrol?
All of these will be going into patrol, with the exception of one of them, what will be our emergency management lieutenant, because the captain that formerly held that position retired, and we converted that to a lieutenant spot.
And
Sorry, go on.
the patrol operation, are you can you discuss your organizational, what you're looking
I
at?
can. It would be better if I provided you all some illustration stuff that we have to give you to visually see it, but I can conceptually tell you what it is, because it will be.
Can you
going into
conceptually and then send it to
Please.
us?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
This weekend, we will basically divide the city into 3 divisions. It will be a north, southeast, and southwest. The north division will be ran by Captain Kavanaugh. Southwest will be ran by Captain Sobiak. Southeast will be ran by Captain Lynch. Each captain will have we work in the day hours, primary business hours that we believe the first level of executive leadership, which is the rank of captain in our organization, should work those business hours. They will have an administrative lieutenant assigned to them to address many of the calls that they receive from me, from you all, to address some of those issues. In addition to that, they will also have property detectives to try to assist with us investigating misdemeanor property crimes at the divisional level. I don't know when that will be implemented, but we certainly plan to do that here in the near future. The other part of that is that in addition to having the 3 divided areas, we still kept the same territories. They didn't change. So there are 22 territories in the city of Syracuse, 9 of which will be in the North Division. There are 7 that will be in the Southeast, and then there were 6 that will be in the Southwest Division. The reason that the Southwest Division, you will see this when you see the maps, Southwest Division is significantly smaller in scale in comparison to the other 2 because of the level of violent crime in that city is significant. So when I show you the map as to where the majority of our violent crime occurs, that's why we made that geographical area smaller for us to try to have the resources to be able to address those issues. The uniformed patrol officers will be divided up about 50 or so officers each division, and then as we incrementally pull those officers out of the classes going solo, we will begin to kind of then separate how the divisions are staffed based upon the challenges that we're seeing in the city. You will have the contact information of the captain for your respective areas, and then also that lieutenant to make sure that that communication is strong, and which is one of the primary reasons that you do a decentralization, is to push resources closer to the people that we're serving. Midterm, long term, the challenge of that with decentralization for our city, we're only 25 square miles. But there may be some value in us having a patrol division actually geographically located in the area versus the centralizing that we have now on Erie Boulevard, which all of them work out of that location. That's something that we need to study to take a look to see if there will be any value in doing so.
So where are we looking at the decentralization?
The decentralization is
within, I mean,
Within the regions.
within the, I know that within the regions, but specific locations.
If we did that, I would probably want to start with Southwest. Because our relationships are the most strained there, our violent crime is the highest there, and it would benefit the most from having a police district in the area. When we did that, I would want to start there.
I guess, so there's nothing's going to, at the moment, nothing.
At the moment, everyone is still coming out of Erie Boulevard. There are 2 roll calls.
They'll just be assigned. They'll be assigned to different.
That's correct. An early and a late roll call. For the officers and the sergeant, there's very minimal change that has occurred. The change is primarily for the lieutenants and the captains in their geographical responsibilities versus a time shift responsibility that they currently have.
Just one more. What is force? I see that. What is that?
What page are you on, ma'am?
I don't know. It's on page
5.
huh? 5.
Was it the forced investigation?
It just says force. What is that?
Force investigation. I would assume that's use of force. Yeah, use of force investigations. So let's say an officer uses force, a sergeant has to do the appropriate documentation of that, and then at some point it goes beyond his or her shift that results in them being there for overtime because of administrative responsibilities that are tied to each use of force. And we have a new use of force policy that we'll be rolling out here as well.
Okay. Can we see it?
Yes, you always see it.
So one last thing, Madam President, you asked what was Act for America?
Yes.
And that is a organization. They had the American First rally set up. The rally was to support President Trump, but we did get our money back on that, correct?
Okay.
That one? That's on page 5. I just wanted to let you know because you did ask what that was for, but that's what that is.
Councilor Rudd.
Google will get you, you know, at the table.
I'd encourage everyone to look up where the permit for that rally was filed as well. Chris?
Carney gave it to him.
Councilor Rudd.
Nothing to do with that office. Look,
It was not Councilor Carney.
when President Obama came, we had a detail for him. Like, why are we making this political?
We've got a question for Councilor Rudd.
Yes, sir.
First of all, Chief, thank you for your work. Officer Piedmont, you and all your guys, thank you for all you do. None of you have envious jobs. There's a lot of information in here, and it's a lot more than we've gotten in the past. So I commend you for that. And I think the number of questions shows that we're unfamiliar with some of the categories. So to the extent you can share like definitions of the different things, I would say both I don't know if these are objects, but the detailed terms. Okay. And then even the column definitions, like I don't totally understand the things that are incurred to meet staffing levels, like any kind of information you can describe for what the minimum staffing levels are, like a table of organization or something that shows.
Kind of what we were.
Yeah. And what happens when somebody's out in terms of being replaced when it is meet minimum staffing level. That seems like, in my uninformed mind, a higher priority.
Okay.
But then in a similar definition for these other police functions, like what does that mean when somebody calls out? How does that get treated?
Okay.
And then same thing in the support of other city functions. That seems a little more explanatory to me when you look at the codes, but not universally. This guy really likes Batman. He wants to be a cop. I'm not, we need cops. We need good cops, so we'll see. But also the fire department. So like to the extent you can do this regularly when we have these, I think that would help us to not have lots of questions. We see it, we'll become familiar, we'll be able to ask, you'll be able to explain it. And I appreciate you asking questions so that you can explain the basic explanations of overtime. But then fire did this, which shows like a visual of the categorical spending. I think something similar for you guys could be helpful. And then I had asked for this in the past and they did it, and it's just overtime spending by calendar year, and it shows it seasonally, so it's by month, so you get a sense of whether it's higher or lower. I would give these to the extent you can incorporate these into this type of regular reporting. I think that would be helpful and would make it so we all understand what's happening.
Yes, sir.
More. I would just give you those.
We'll be ready for that. I will certainly clean this up for you so that it makes much more sense. But I'm still in the process of I don't know what I don't know, and we're always behind fire. Even though we think we're ahead of it.
There's a police versus fire basketball game. To the extent police is short tonight, I would love to be a ringer, but I don't know if I'm going to get the call for the invite. So
everybody loves fire.
Okay, Chief, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarge.
Funny.
yeah, I gotta go. I'm on a party.
Listen, dirty. I think that's a while.